Hi, I'm Anna Nair. I'm a senior tech journalist at AIN. Today, I'm very happy to have Kiran Kuppili and Bala Natarajan for the first DECODE webinar on operational excellence, improving customer experience with Gen AI, powered by Executive Director and Head of Institutional Banking Group and Payments, DBS Tech India. And Bala Natarajan is the VP of Generative AI and Analytics at Capgemini, India. Hello, Kiran and Bala. Thank you for taking the time. Before we begin, can we have a quick introduction from your end? Kiran, why don't we start with you?
Hi, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I've been working with DBS Tech India since 2017. I'm going to complete 7 years this November. I'm heading delivery of IBG applications, institutional banking group applications, and payments platform. In my previous roles, I was heading the delivery of conversation AI and Gen AI implementation across DBS as well. That's briefly about me.
Yeah, thank you, Kiran. Bala, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I want to firstly thank everybody for joining on a Friday afternoon. Also AIM as well as DBS for organizing this event. I'm Bala Natarajan. I work with Capgemini now for the last 9-10 years. Been in the data analytics space for about 20 odd. Started out in financial services, so hope to offer something of value to all of you today. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Bala. Just one call out. So we have Kiran, but under the username of Shrikant Satya. Do not get confused. So that is Kiran for us. All right. So let's begin. Let's just dive right into it. So Bala, why don't you tell me what is the impact of generative AI in customer service across different domains?
Sure. So, because we are, some of us are privileged to be in India, right? We work with customers across sectors and geographies around the world. I think generative AI has been around even before ChatGPT for some years. Many of us who've been around know them as transformer models. And after ChatGPT, of course, the virality of that offering itself has been so strong that we find, IT services as well as customer service probably the biggest uptake of generative AI use cases. Across customer service, think of it as some enterprises are looking to address this for cost saving and productivity gain. Some are looking to drive more creativity for customer service, area, as well as think of it as an agent assist sort of model. So I'll give you 2 or 3 examples, and then I'll probably, because I think we have probably multiple questions and trying to time this right, there can always be follow-ups if needed. So firstly, I'll start with the manufacturing example. So in the B2B world, obviously what happens is customer service is hard because there's a lot of attrition in the customer service area. And enterprises need to constantly keep training these customer service agents. So the shorter you make the learning curve, the better it is. So first principles why enterprises use generative AI for customer service is really to shrink the training cycle, or in some sense level the playing field for an experienced as well as a relatively newcomer service agent, right? That's one part. The other part is common use cases can relate to, you're getting a lot of customer email. How do you really parse that email, classify it based on the intent underlying that email, summarize it, make it easily consumable for a service agent? Sometimes can also automate first draft responses. We're still not removing the human from the loop, but we will make it all possible for the agent to be able to respond to an email in a fraction of the time window that it earlier used to take. That's one example, right? If you go to financial services, I'll give an insurance example. Maybe, he will give you a banking example from DBS. But in the insurance space, we have a lot of customer service agents who are, let's say, struggling with policy documentation. Right? You get a number of customer queries into call centers as well as email and chat service centers. How do you really address those queries relating to policy? You got to make sure you're compliant with what you're responding. You're not giving misleading responses. These are involving financial stakes for your customers. At the same time, you need to do the right thing for your customers. So you can typically look at impact in the measurement of, let's say, how good is your customer satisfaction score before and after, net promoter score measurements, or can you look at standard productivity service metrics like first time resolution rates, or you could look at average service resolution time windows. So those are things that we typically look at using. Customer from the insurance side has worked with us to do something like this, where we are really policy assistance is what we do for customer service agents. So they in turn help their end customers really understand, whether they're eligible to make a claim, can they really get something in so much time, what coverage exceptions exist, and so on and so forth, right? Thirdly, I'll give you a consumer goods example. We work with a fairly large global, luxury retail house, which is also making its own brand or line of products, where they have these retail stores where they have, what we would normally have salespeople, but we call them beauty advisors because they are in the beauty in the cosmetics industry. So these beauty advisors get a lot of assistance to make a customer experience better. You're talking about in-store experiences, so you're not even talking online. These are offline customer experiences where the beauty advisor is able to understand what the customer is potentially searching for, oftentimes suggest what the customer might want to be, looking at, potentially not immediately translate to a purchase. These are luxury items, so people may make multiple visits, but you want to build a good experience. The purchase experience is as important as the product itself in these kinds of industries. So these beauty advisors get generative AI assistance. Think of it like an augmented trainer support for these beauty advisors, essentially salespeople, who are able to then provide better customer experiences. I'm just trying to give you a flavor for whether it is a offline experience, online experience, email, phone call. It doesn't matter. One of the common use cases is call center transformations. But anyway, for the lack of time, I will yield Vandana. Maybe we go to the next question.
Sure.
Or maybe Kim can talk about banking examples.
Yes, exactly. So Kiran, can you just follow up on that? What would you like to say?
Yeah, Bala covered most of the customer service aspect from insurance, retail. We'll touch upon one example that we are working on in bank, right? So in institutional banking group, the kind of trade documents we deal with for corporate customers, they run into several pages. At times when customers call us, call our contact center agents and say how much of payment I need to further make to the buyer, uh, how much of refunds I need to get, and all. So those questions need some calculation also based on what kind of uh, trade agreement they get into and how much of time elapsed in the trade cycle and how many milestones are met in the trade cycle. For those cases, currently it is a bit of manual where customer will be on the line and then contact center agents quickly pull out the trade agreements and go through the numbers and calculate what it is, and then arrive at some answer to customer. With Gen AI, it cannot do entire calculation by itself, but it can definitely help quickly pull out relevant numbers and offer to the agent, these are the numbers you need to work with. And then it saves time for them instead of going through pages of documents, right? So that is one more example where Gen AI is doing a mix of repetitive tasks, but also a bit of reasoning as well.
All right. So thank you, Kiran. So would you be able to share a use case as well where you've seen technology improve in the case of any of your clients in improved customer interactions and satisfaction? And what was generative AI's role to generate these ideas, designs, and prototypes?
Okay. See, when we started with conversation AI in DBS, right, that time just transformers, Google published a paper on transformers, attention is all you need. That's when we also started working on BERT and so on, different algorithms to build a really interactive chatbot. Okay, that was rolled out to multiple countries along with our IBMB channels. While that is servicing customers across geographies, we face certain challenges like in Asian markets. For example, if you take India, not everybody is so well versed with English. When we chat on simple chatbot, we tend to mix Hindi, English, or some other native language and then English. That's where things get a bit complicated. When I train a model in English, can I deploy as is in India? No. Can I deploy as is in Taiwan or Hong Kong and so on? No. So that's where we had to build models specific to that language and that dialect and deploy. And while that was a challenge we could overcome, when we wanted to move towards voice bots, right? Why? Because not everybody is so comfortable typing something in Hindi, a long sentence. They may want to leave a voice note. In India, in some places we don't have 4G, 5G. Back then, I'm talking about 2019, 2020 during COVID time. And then how do we service our customers? So those were the challenges we faced. With the advent of GenAI, to a large extent, those problems were resolved, and technology also improved parallelly. The network has improved, network speeds have improved in Asian markets. Add to that, what we are currently now working on is voice bots that can service customers. We are working on it, whether it's a collection-based bots. For example, if you want to collect a debt from a customer, instead of human calling them, we can have a voice bot calling them and then get the promise to pay, how much they want to pay and all. That is more automated way, and it can call the customer at their preferred time also. So, for example, somebody wants to receive a call during lunchtime. It can be done with a voice bot. We can just schedule it, and then it can do. So then we can free up humans to do something else. Work with more complicated customers and complex customers who wants more information to pay the debt and all. So that is one. The other one, whenever we receive a call, the humans, right, in contact centers, they also have a responsibility to summarize it and their transcript and extract the summary of it and store it for auditing purpose and training purpose later. And also, if there is a repeat complaint, they can always look at the summary to understand the history of it. GenAI comes in very handy when it comes to summarization of interaction activity. After the call, after 8 hours of taking the calls, right, they usually spend around 1 hour to summarize all the calls that they have handled that particular day. But whereas if I plug that feed into GenAI, it can real-time summarize it for entire interaction and give it for proofreading, and they can finish it off in 10 to 15 minutes and close it. Yeah, so these are the two where we could see a significant improvement and where we could overcome the challenges of GenAI when compared to traditional conversation AI platforms.
Got it, got it. So you're talking about the chat interface, the interactions that happen. So to get on a little bit on the technical side, how does automating repeat chat interactions and personalizing responses impact customer service teams and their efficiencies, Kiran?
Okay. When there are FAQs, what we call frequently asked questions, those are very easy to answer. When a bot can answer, we can train it. At times when our customers are not so digital savvy, right? They rather prefer to pick up a phone and then talk to somebody human. Even then, a voice bot can answer it, and few people may not like it. Few people may want voice also to sound like a human, right? So currently, what is happening is, as soon as you get a call, you will know it's a voice bot or it's a human. That's a challenge. So usually, the moment it is voice bot, people tend to disengage from the call. They don't feel encouraged to have a conversation, right? This is where GenAI can assist human rather than replace human. And whenever there's a change in product features or change in the product design, even then, what happens is when we feed it into GenAI can quickly respond, generate the responses of frequently asked questions with the changed product metrics and parameters. That will actually help reduce the product launch time as well, because we don't have to train the whole army of customer care centers, customer care agents on the new product features. The time is saved. Okay. The other one is consistency and accuracy. When we have to communicate about a policy change or even a product change or a terms and conditions change, if you template it and then give it to the GenAI, it can always generate a response which is very, very consistent. And even if you repeat it, it speaks the same language across, whether it is India or whether it is Singapore. So DBS being a bank working across 17 different nations, when we have to reach out to customers, it's also important for us that we communicate the same message consistently across the globe.
Yeah, got it, got it. Thank you, Kiran, for that. Bala, the next one's for you. So we have several studies which have shown that using generative AI can also improve productivity. So can this also accelerate the product development cycles for companies? What do you think?
Had to happen at least once. I was speaking on mute. So, whether it is offline or online, right? I think, meaning physical or digital product, absolutely Gen AI can help in product development. I think Kiran just now gave an example of how you can accelerate product development cycles. So I'll start with an example so that people understand, and then I'll give the theory also underlying this domain, right? So we have been working for some time now with a fragrance manufacturer. Now, obviously, they produce a number of candidate fragrances and then shortlist and then launch, right? So if you look at the underlying process by which fragrances are developed, there are people called perfumers. For those of us who are relatively new to that space, and these perfumers, the full-time job that they do really is to create fragrances from a variety of innovative ingredients, right? They keep mixing and matching and testing and looking for whether this could be a hit with consumers, right? That's the role of what perfumers do. But because of the very nature of the process, which is very manual, it was not only taking very, time-consuming, effort. It was also becoming very painful for the marketer to shrink product dev cycles because, this takes forever to launch a new flavor in the market. What Gen AI has been able to help, and I'm talking about from POC to production mode, there's something like 3,000 odd perfumers who are now using LLMs. The idea is really take a two-step approach. I'll first talk about the technology underneath the hood, but then we'll also talk about benefits, right? Generative AI is very, very good when it comes to becoming creative. So if you're looking for creativity unlocking, Gen AI is a fantastic tool, and that's what has happened with this customer. So they use a 2 LLM step approach. One LLM is really looking to understand the patterns behind formulas of real fragrances in the market, and maybe some candidates which they already had looked at before launching those. And then another LLM really looks to score new formulae which these perfumers are coming up with, and then tries to see how closely they resemble the real world fragrances, right? And then the scores are then provided for business stakeholders to really start taking decisions. Now, look at the benefit. Post adopting Gen AI as a mechanism for this process, they were able to create 500,000, 500,000 fragrance candidates with this 2 LLM approach. And there were 3,000 odd users, and they were able to launch 2 fragrance flavors within a matter of 6 months, which is fantastic for the company. For us, it may look like it's a very long period of time, but 2 fragrance flavors in the market in 6 months from idea to implementation is very, very good for them. So if you go to the theoretical underlay behind this, right, usually what will happen is you will have some sort of ideation or consumer research first, and then you look at concept development and visualization and all of that. Then you go and look at designing it, and then you say, okay, how do I design for a variety of constraints, right? You look at manufacturability, availability of raw materials, sustainability, of course, cost-wise, it should be possible for your consumer target segment to be able to afford it, and so on and so forth. Now, each of these processes, and I'm deliberately not using a slide, but if you can imagine that as a sequence of processes in that domain of product development, every step of the way you could have generative AI help you if you choose to use it, right? It's about cost benefit trade-offs. So typically at the market survey stage, you could potentially look at gathering information on consumer research. It could be anything from something an application review on a mobile phone to looking at synthesizing some of that and providing insights for somebody who will then combine it with primary research, right? It can't operate in isolation. Then you look at concept development. You can literally use text-based prompts to generate images, right? And you can generate so many images that it can become overwhelming for you to choose from. And that is where I'm talking about unlocking creativity, right? So literally you are able to go from a design studio. Earlier the process will happen with a design studio. Now it can literally happen in a meeting room when you're talking to business. Real time you can generate those images and show and take feedback and iterate this. Then you go to concept refinement, right? You can literally start doing a storyboarding. You're just like you do market campaigns, you can do storyboarding with generative AI, right? It can do images, it can do text, it can do all of that. And then you can go into simulations when you're testing your concept. If you want to look at it from a manufacturability standpoint, do you want to change your materials there to make it more affordable? Do you want to make it more sustainable and so on? So every step of the way in product development, absolutely generative AI can help. We are already seeing a lot of automotive manufacturers in Europe particularly start taking or adopting Gen AI for product development, primarily because the auto industry is getting disrupted with the advent of EV and so on, or hybrid vehicles. So the constraints in the competitive market are forcing the hand of enterprises to adopt Gen AI for product development.
Great. I mean, that's a very solid example. I mean, LLM for perfumes and, like just expediting the whole product cycle. But we also know at the same time there are a lot of challenges surrounding it as well. So, Bala, what do you think are the challenges that companies face when integrating generative AI into their product development process, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, so I'll not spend a lot of time on the risk. I think this audience has probably already read enough about everything from hallucinations to data privacy to everything, right? See, if you look at it from a consumer-centric business, everybody's gotten spoiled rotten by the Amazon experience, right? Everybody wants an Amazon-like experience on everything they look to buy, whether it is a B2B business or B2C business, they want same thing. Personalization, right? Customization. Now, the problem with personalization or customization is there is data that you need to make it customized or to make it, personalized. Where is that right trade-off? How do you handle data privacy so that you don't violate the law of the land? You obviously got to be compliant. At the same time, you protect the data privacy requirements of your customer base. I mean, particularly in markets like Europe, this is becoming a very, very severe problem. As we all know, the EU region has also rolled out an AI Act. So there are different classifications of enterprises who develop, who consume, who publish, and all of that. Now, so obviously data privacy is a risk. But the most common and I would say irritating risk for users, right, is the one of hallucination, which many of us might have already experienced when we are all using ChatGPT or any of those different variations which are now sitting even in your mobile phones. So for example, I just now gave you about concept visualization or, development, right? Think about it this way. I'm just, requesting you to imagine, like if I were to write a prompt saying, make a picture of somebody painting a flower. Now, it won't be surprising to you if some image came up where a person or a human is actually painting a literal plant, a flower, a physical plant. Whereas what I would have meant is I'm asking somebody to generate an image of a person painting an image, right, on a canvas. It's a piece of art. It's not like painting an actual flower. So this distinction itself your LLM can't make because all it is doing is word associations. So you can imagine the complexity while we talk about it with, very, very, plain and simple language, we might tend to be oversimplifying the complexity underlying the use of LLMs or generative AI for product development. So we got to understand that these risks are there. You obviously have to not only have the human in the loop, but you also have to have the human smart enough to validate and ensure that you review the AI output consistently, right? And that is where governance becomes very, very important. So I would say you had a two-part question. You had risks, and then how do you address those or mitigate those risks? So clearly governance is super critical for this. You got to have definitions. I think in the India example itself, we've had fair number of accidents in the past. A cell phone manufacturer had an episode in the early days of generative AI launch and ChatGPT rollout, where somebody just dumped the entire minutes of the meeting into the prompt window. Context length be done. So you're ending up leaking your IP into the rest of the training data world for other users globally, which you should govern, right? So you should have learning and awareness creation for your user community. Is the point in trying to say, I will build this application for 5,000, 20,000 users, unless your users are equipped to learn it and handle it well. It's like, learning to drive a race car, right? If you learn the controls well, you'll have a good ride. If you didn't, you'll be a wreck on the road. So you got to be careful about how you're going to think about the user community, what can they do, can't they do, govern the data, make sure that data privacy is respected and compliance is in place.
Correct. So just coming back to Kiran. Kiran, so we spoke about the challenges, the good part of it. Now, how do we measure these things? So what are the key factors that determine the success of generative AI implementation in achieving operational excellence? And how do you understand your ROI on the technology implementation part?
Yeah. Before I go to that part of the question, I would just like to extend what Bala said. The governance problem, right? So one of the key challenges in adopting Gen AI and then applying it to entire customer base. It's challenging. Being a bank, the perspective is that when we are regulated by a regulator in each country, we have to be extremely careful on what we tell customer, right? Whether it is Gen AI or a text-based chatbot or whatever. That's why with DBS we are a bit careful on what we want to show to customer, and then we want to be a bit more cautious on deploying Gen AI for directly answering the customers in some cases, right? So we have built a governance model within, which will, if there's a Gen AI in the back which is running, we have a document QA which will take the response, and again it will be a prompt again to check whatever facts presented are actually from the documents that is given to model or not. So that's a cross validation that there is no scope for hallucination there, and if at least 90% of it is correct and coming from the document which are already there, only then show it to customer. Otherwise, route them to a human. The human can answer and handle the complex scenario. It's one of the success measures also. Coming to your question, how we can avoid this hallucination is one, and first call resolution is very important here, whether it is Gen AI or human, right? So when we are deploying an LLM, so our ability to resolve right there and then in the first call itself. And second is the customer coming back repeatedly with the same complaint? Are we closing it properly? Is Gen AI is able to intelligent enough to close it properly? That is another one. And then number of calls we addressed in a specific time versus what it was earlier. Because we look at Gen AI as a helper bot, and we do a co-pilot for every use case. When I say co-pilot, when human is taking up the call, a similar call gets transferred to a Gen AI bot. Okay, and it also answers another customer on the same problem. And during this co-pilot, we fine-tune the LLM and the knowledge graph behind it. And once we fine-tune it, once we have enough confidence, then we say autopilot. So once co-pilot is done, we move to autopilot. So in each of these phases, we have different success metrics. Once it is completely in autopilot phase, then we measure as the same with the same parameters as we measure for human agent. First call resolution, no number of repeated complaints, no hallucination, factual information is sent, and number of hours saved in addition to what we have traditionally, and how the customer is satisfied. So CSAT survey is what we do for every call. So what is the customer's feedback on it? That's more important. And also the employee feedback, the employee who is monitoring that model, the feedback of the employee as well. So all this together sums up whether it is success or not. So not just the cost of implementation, but more of qualitative there on how it is performing. So cost recovery will, in some cases payback is 3 months, in some cases payback is 2 years or 3 years based on what we are deploying there.
All right. And how does choosing the right technology for a specific use case impact the success of a project or a solution? Kiran, can you just give a gist on that as well?
So when all these open source LLMs, whatever we see, right, those are trained on a generic data. and then we have to fine tune it for a banking domain, whether it is cards or wealth or trade and so on and so forth. While that is done, can GenAI alone solve everything? No, in our experience, it is not. We need to have most of these LLMs will have specific context length. Some come with 4K, some come with 8K, some come with 2K, and so on. So the context that we build in our prompts largely influence this, and beyond a certain context length, we can't scale. That's where we have to assimilate this information into vector databases or a knowledge graph, and then overlap that information over the context as a fact, and then apply that as a prompt, to get the response. And on top of response, we again do a grounding check, as I was explaining earlier. So the choice of technology is LLM alone is not. We use Neo4j and we use Elasticsearch in between, and apart from whatever traditional UI tools that we deploy. And of course, GPUs, everybody knows what we have to use and all. Yeah.
All right. So we spoke about the uses, the challenges, how do we measure. Now we want to understand from an organization point of view, what can be done to foster it. So Bala, this one's for you. How do you think organizations can foster a culture of experimentation and innovation mindset when adopting generative AI technology?
Okay. So I think the key word is change, right? And unfortunately, whether it's individuals or enterprises, we don't seem to react to change very well. We struggle with it. So from the individual side, I would say, there is obviously, because bad news sells well, there's a lot of stuff on media which says it will eliminate jobs and so on and so forth, which causes a lot of insecurity for, the I would say, engineer community. I think the key, first of all, is, let us put away our insecurities and replace that more with curiosity, I would say, right? Because pretty much every part of the enterprise is going to get impacted. Of course, I'm in that area, I will espouse it, but my point is, to quote Gates again, right? We tend to overestimate what happens in the short term, but grossly underestimate what happens in the long term. So there is a change that is going to happen over time. It may be grindingly slow. It may not sort of take us by surprise as everybody claims. But point is, one has to remain curious, right? In each of our respective job roles, how can something like this, a new set of technologies, actually impact us? Can it really replace us? Where is it that human brings value is something that each of us have to reflect on. And of course, the organization has to do its bit by creating learning programs and schedules where people can understand the basics of this so that they can learn to experiment, right? So this is one part of it. The other part is not even, sort of unique to generative AI. I think there should be an environment where you define the playing field, you set up the governance, like what, Kiran was saying, and then you allow people to fail. It's okay to make small mistakes, have a sandbox environment if that is what it demands, have different functions, play with it, and see what can or can't happen. And when people touch and feel the technology, their insecurities vanish. They understand what are the limitations. They know where it can help them, whether it's a cost-saving play, whether it's a creativity play, whether it's an automation play. That is something that each function can learn by experimentation. But for doing that, we need to make sure that environment is enabling such experimentation. If everything is seen as a cost, or it is seen only as a tool to reduce headcount, etc., it doesn't work well with obviously most of the employee population, right? So in some sense, it is about driving value for our end customer. What is important is that, and from there work backwards, what it means. I mean, it may not necessarily mean, and as Kiran pointed out already, while all of us want to do contact center transformation, right? No customer wants to really talk to a machine. They all want a human voice. Now the question would be, how do you make that human voice very efficient? At the same time, empathetic to talking to the customer, right? Customer typically calls you because they have a problem. Now if you are able to solve the problem first time right, then, they become your word of mouth advertisers. And as we all know, retaining a customer 1/7, less expensive compared to acquiring a new one. So as long as we work with customer centricity, and keep the employee population's insecurities in mind, the organization can do this change management very well. And finally, right, I would close that topic by saying earlier we used to value people who would have all the right answers. With ChatGPT and its advent, now we want all the people who will ask the right questions. So remember, it's such a simple thing, but it has very profound implications for what people need to be good at in the future, right? They got to be problem solvers, they got to be thinkers, and they got to work with AI generated output to be able to do better than that. So that enough itself should tell us enough.
So I'm pretty sure at an org level there would be all sorts of conversations surrounding it or bringing this into the picture. So Bala, can you tell me what are some of the interesting boardroom conversations you are hearing these days, and what are customers now looking for besides generative AI?
Okay, so that's again a two-part question. I would say on generative AI itself, the earlier question you asked, Kiran, is a very important one, Vandana, which is how do I really measure the return I make on it, right? Because remember, while as individual users we may see we are all spoiled by the Google experience, right? We think it is all free, but because we are the product, it is all free. Now, the moment you start using generative AI, the problem is there are huge spends involved. If you're rolling out a use case with 20,000 users, remember on a run cost basis, at least some sizable fraction of the 20,000 users is going to consume some sort of compute or a API call, right? Tokens are going to get consumed. This is not even including the setup cost, the POC cost, the production cost, and all of that. So the benefit that you quantify is super critical, and that's what is occupying the board also, right? Because what has happened since ChatGPT, I am myself from a consulting firm, but to speak on behalf of the industry, the entire industry has knocked on boardrooms. And they've said, oh, generative AI can give you 60% productivity, 80%. All sorts of tall claims have been made, right? And some of these consulting firms are now talking about the hype cycle and the peak of the hype cycle and whatnot. So we're slowly probably getting past that point where reality is sort of hitting all of us. At that point, I think I'll probably, because it's a Friday evening, I would say I'll give you an anecdote, right? Maybe this is the last question. I don't know whether we have more time, but see, we were testing a bot for a manufacturing customer, right? And the customer told us that bot looks good on performance functionally, but you got to do some testing because we wanted to provoke it. Now this went up to the board. That's why I'm quoting this example. So